Welcome to Got Grass, conversations with the legends and leaders of bluegrass. You've enjoyed live bluegrass at Guitar Town CT concerts in Hampton, Connecticut since 2008. From Tony Rice, Rouse Stanley, and Doyle Lawson to Tim O'Brien, Sierra Hall, and Billy Strings. Now you can go behind the scenes as we chat with your favorite bluegrass stars. I'm your podcast host, Chris Worth. Well, I want to welcome with great pleasure Richard Greene to Got Grass. Welcome, sir.
My pleasure. Welcome to you.
I usually start these conversations with a non-music question, which is, what would a perfect day off be for you?
Oh, well, I don't do that.
You don't take days off?
I'm doing photography now, full time, for many years, and a day off means I go out and take pictures. So that's not really a day off.
Yeah.
I don't know what that would be.
Yeah. So if it wasn't music, it's photography. You're just busy. You keep yourself busy all the time, pretty much.
Well, it's only photography.
Yeah.
And getting older now, it's a little bit difficult to get around. So I wouldn't waste my time doing nothing and taking a so-called day off. It's just not my style. I love what I'm doing.
Yeah. Well, that's good.
Yeah.
I guess you're one of the rare few that can do what they love to do for as long as they want to do it and not worry about, I don't know. It's nice. It's a nice thing. Good for you.
Yeah. Well, what's to worry about? What would there be to worry about?
I don't know. So could you talk a little bit about, this is a long time ago, but just about your childhood and how you got to be so interested in music as a kid, to the point where you became an amazing musician. How did that all happen?
Oh, let's see. I was 5 years old, and my mother worshipped Jascha Heifetz as a rock star, which he was at that time. Mm-hmm. And he would fill stadiums of 100,000 people and things, just playing the violin. So she forced me to have violin lessons every morning before kindergarten. I would take a lesson and then walk across the street to the school.
Wow.
That was pretty horrible. I hated that. And did that for many years until I was like old enough and strong enough to just quit, which I did around, probably 8 or 9 years later. Mm-hmm. Having done that. It was not pleasant, and I despised the violin as a result.
Oh. That's funny. I was talking to the fiddle player Tammy Rogers, who, from the Steel Drivers and country music, and I said to her, "What was it like when you first got a fiddle in your hand?" She said, "I fell in love with it the moment I saw it. I never fell out of love with it from the first day I held it. It always felt comfortable. I never minded playing, practicing." Sounds like the opposite of you.
Yes, sir. Definitely the opposite of me.
So you must have, even though you were fighting it, you must have learned a lot during those early years of playing, even though you didn't really like it.
Yeah. Well, in the last few years, I had a better teacher. His name was William Krauss, a really good violinist. And I did actually start to enjoy it around that time. We would play duets and it became enjoyable. But I still quit. I can't remember the quitting moment or scenario, but I did get back into it with a huge fervor a few years later.
So you were playing primarily classical violin.
Only classical, yeah.
Only classical. That. So then at some point, did you have an epiphany when you heard, some Benny Martin or something? Or like, how did you get interested in bluegrass fiddle?
Well, I was had a job. Oh, let's see. This is a little bit complex. I had a job across the street from a club named the Ash Grove. And I would walk over there during lunch hour just to look around. And I had a friend or two that nightly almost, we would go there and watch folk music concerts. We fell in love with folk music, Odetta and stuff like that.
Hmm.
and old blues guys, and so one afternoon, I walked across the street. I went back to the evenings. The New Lost City Ramblers were there quite often, and we've totally fell in love with them, worshipped them individually. You know, banjo, guitar, mandolin, violin, uh, banjo, guitar, and all right. Now back to my real estate job. One afternoon, I walked across the street during lunch, and in the lobby of the place, there was a fiddle player sitting down, just playing by himself. And his name was Scott Stoneman,
Mm-hmm.
and I'd never heard anything like that. It was completely life changing and mind blowing. I never saw a violin do that uh, with such ferocity, intensity, tone, technique. It was absolutely mind blowing. And he was only playing with three fingers. He had I think his index finger on his left hand was useless from a accident I think he had on a railroad train track of some kind. So he played with these three fingers. Unbelievable. Double stops, octaves, triple stops. Um,
Yeah.
and he held the bow like you're grabbing an axe and about to chop a tree. So his technique was not traditional at all.
Right.
So I fell in love with that. And he was an extreme alcoholic, but I still had him stay at my house whenever I could and studied with him. One time I had to take him to the hospital. He was suffering delirium tremens, which is not a good thing to witness. That's how bad he was with alcohol. And um, the Stoneman family was why he was there, and he was playing with them at nightly at the Ash Grove as well. And they despised me. They thought I was giving him alcohol and turning him into more of a drunk, which I wasn't doing. And also that I was stealing his licks and things. There was a lot of tension going on in those days with me and the Stonemans. Um, this is kind of a confused way of stating the tale, but I think you're getting some of the ideas. So that was the very beginning of my infatuation and obsession, which lasted forever.
Yeah. It's so funny because I just mentioned to you I had spoken to Tammy Rogers on a podcast interview, and I asked her who her fiddle hero was, and she said Scotty Stoneman. She said the
Oh my
exact same
God.
thing. Yeah, she
Oh
said
my God.
when I heard him play, I just I never saw anything like it. It totally transformed my life in a second, she said. So that's
Yeah, he
funny.
played with the Kentucky Colonels also in those days.
Yeah.
And he would drive the band. They would just he would take endless choruses on a fiddle tune, and they would just like be his not not puppets, but he would control them in a way with his fiddle. And uh, also when he would play, he would do a jazz kind of idiomatic thing when he played with them. When it came time to take a solo on a song, he would take many choruses, just like it was a jazz group. So
Right.
that was very unusual as well.
Yeah. Huh.
Yeah.
Do you think your fascination with him was in any way a reaction against your classical training and hatred of early violin, or was it just you just fell in love with him?
No, it was informed by by my knowledge of violin.
Yeah.
He was doing things that I never saw a violinist do, and I knew that because I saw a lot of violinists, and it was informed by that. Um, yeah.
Yeah. Do you remember any point in your life at when you thought to yourself that you wanted to be a professional musician, or did you just kind of ease into it based on playing with bands and this and that, and you
It was at that time that I quit, decided to quit that job I was doing and join whatever band I could find.
yeah.
So went to the record. There was LP record stores in those days, and I would listen to bluegrass old time groups that were booked to come to the Los Angeles area, and one of them was the Greenbrier Boys. So they came. It was Huntington Beach actually, and that was an hour or 2 hours from LA, south of LA.
Yeah.
So I drove down to their gig, walked up to them during a sound check. It says, "Do you guys need a fiddle player?" That's just like that. And they didn't. They said, "No, we don't need a fiddle player, but we need a bass player." So I said, "Okay, good. I'll take that job. As long as you let me play half the show on fiddle, I'll play the other half on bass."
Nice.
So that was the deal we made.
Yeah.
So I drove across the country with a bass neck between the two front bucket seats. And while I'm driving, I'm left-handed, learning how to play the bass while I'm driving with the left hand. And it was mainly 1-5. There was nothing, complicated, but I did have to learn it. And then arrived there and started playing with that band.
Wow.
In 1965, I guess.
Yeah. I've heard, and this may or may not be true, that you're credited with inventing the so-called chop on the fiddle. At least people give you credit for that. Did you actually come up with that idea of like using it as a rhythm instrument, just bouncing the bow kind of on it, or how did that happen?
I'm the true inventor of it.
You are.
But it happened before I invented it. I was sort of born doing it. I was doing it in the Greenbrier Boys, and then I just called the chunky chop, and they kept saying, "Do more of that, do more of that." I hadn't really done much with it except rhythm with the left hand muffling without pitch. And then from there, I joined the Bill Monroe band, the Bluegrass Boys, and Bill was quite the tutor and guru of music. And I decided to study under him and just obey him. So he would call me Richard without an R, Richard. He said, one day he said, "Richard, play more rhythm. Don't play any solo lines during the songs. Just play rhythm during the songs. Play your breaks and then play your fiddle tunes. The rest of the time, just play rhythm." So fine. I was kind of rushing a bit, and it was good advice. Yeah. So I started playing rhythm only. Like that would amount to be 3/4 of the show or more, just playing rhythm and the chop, but the way I had done it before. But my hand sort of arm got really tired doing that. So elbow fell down and the wrist opened up like that, just out of exhaustion. And now I'm chopping in this position. And there was a revelation because I could lift the muffling of my left hand, and on the up chop, and there's a note. So it's chop, note, and then I developed patterns of that, and that was the true invention of the chop, and I am acknowledged as that. There's no dispute actually. There's some musicological treatises done on that, showing. I was going to show that to you. I don't have it on. I was going to show you the family tree of the chop. Starts with me and then branches out, but I don't have that. I should have prepared that, but I don't have it ready.
That's okay. No, that's interesting anyway. So what did you call it, the chop back then, or was it just rhythm?
Yes, no, I call it chop.
The chop. Yeah.
I got rid of the word chunky. You just said the chop.
Yeah. So you mentioned Bill Monroe, and I know you played in his band. I think was Peter Rowan in the band with you at the time, and was that the band with Bill Keith and that group, or
no? It's Peter Rowan, Lamar Greer, and Bill's son on bass.
Gotcha.
Myself on fiddle, Bill on mandolin.
Gotcha.
Bill Keith was just before that.
Just before, yeah. So how did you approach Bill Monroe and say, "Do you want a fiddle player?" Or did he come after you? How did that happen?
Well, he was managed by a guy named Ralph Rinsler. Mm-hmm. Ralph Rinsler preceded me in the Greenbrier Boys, so he knew about my fiddle playing. So Bill said, his fiddle player did not show up for a job in Canada. He was about to go on stage that evening without a fiddle player. So he called Ralph, said, Ralph, send me somebody quick right away. So Ralph contacted me and the Green Bar Boys. I flew up immediately and got there backstage while they're sort of warming up, ready to go on. And they're all wearing hats. And I didn't know who anybody who was. So I walked up to one of the hats. I said, which one of you guys is Bill Monroe? And that hat was Pete Rowan. Right. So Pete Rowan said, well, there's Bill over there. So introduced myself and we went on stage, and I was the only time in history where one of the Bluegrass Boys performed without a hat.
Without a hat, yeah.
And there's pictures of that, actually. And then after that show, I went back to wherever I was, and then was invited to audition, come to Nashville and do an official audition, and I did get in the band, and started to wear a hat.
Right. Did he give you a hat, or were you allowed to go buy your own hat? Or
well, you had to. No, you had to get your own hat, but it had to be white like everyone else's.
Certain style,
straw hat.
I've always been curious. I had actually Peter Rowan was on this podcast about a month ago and talked about the same things, interesting times with Bill Monroe and you.
Yeah.
How did Bill Monroe happen to find and know so many of these old songs? Was he a student of old music, or he seemed to know and play so many songs that came out of old traditions? And did he just look for them, or how did that all?
Oh no, he grew up with that.
That was
Kentucky. He grew up with old time music, and that's his music is old time music in overdrive. I think that's someone quoted saying that, but it's old time music, just with this intense, different way of playing it.
Right.
Yeah.
When you were with Monroe, did he invite you to his farm to go work the horses or hang out or anything? Or
no, we had all the Bluegrass Boys had to go and bale hay, throw hay from driving the pickup truck out there, go up in the hay stack, whatever that is, throw that hay down, then pick it up and put it in the truck. Pete Rowan and I did that a few times, and we would be the three of us would be in this one-seater pickup truck, really old truck. And Pete would be doing the driving, and Bill said, "You don't go over 40 miles an hour." And when they'd fall asleep, and then when Pete would hit 41 miles an hour, Bill would wake up and said, "I can't stand that anymore. Wake up and slow him down, like a clock, like a speedometer."
That's amazing.
Yeah. So we did a few of those trips.
What was the policy in that band on drinking, or I don't know, smoking pot? Was it verboten, forbidden, or was it he didn't really care as long as you came on stage and played?
Oh no, it was absolutely forbidden. Pete and I were stoned the entire time, though, on pot.
Well, I was kind of wondering about that, but I'd like to bring it up. Yeah.
And then sometimes he would say to me, "Richard, Pete's been smoking that stuff again," and look at me, and I said, "I don't."
Oh boy. So
let me think about that a little bit more. I'm not sure about if I think I might have not smoked only before the shows. I might have valued my consciousnness. I'm not sure if I think I refrained from smoking quite a bit as well. It's a little vague, but we smoked a whole lot back then.
Yeah. So what was the pay scale? Were you paid a salary or just paid like per gig $15 or something?
Yeah. Let me think. I think it was $15 a show, and then we had the Opry every week. That might have been the big pay. That might have been 65 or something for the Opry. But it was you couldn't live. You could hardly live on that. I forget the exact numbers, but it was not enough to live on. Yeah. So we'd have to have roommate. Pete and I did roommating a lot. I roommated with other people, in order to make it work.
So you guys traveled all together on the bus, the famous bus that Pete Rowan talks about.
Right, and Pete
Bluegrass
was the driver.
Breakdown. Yeah.
That's right, the Bluegrass Breakdown,
Uh,
which it broke down quite a bit.
Yeah.
And we all have our own little bunk. I had an upper bunk, and right around my lower middle right hand back, right around there, there was a rivet stuck up in the mattress, which I had to deal with for the entire time because that was my bunk.
Uh,
I'll never forget that rivet. That was bad.
so aside from telling you to play that chop all the time, was that the only advice he gave you in the band? Was he pretty much let you play what you wanted on solos and things, or was he?
Oh yeah, no, I completely innovated. My objective was to innovate completely the job, do it different than it's ever been done, which I did, and
Yeah.
he liked it quite a bit. There was some. He would introduce me sometimes, saying, "Listen to this solo. This is really new and unusual." It was the one solo on Blue Night, actually, that he was that was one of the most innovative things I've ever done, actually, because it was involved uh, you, one and four finger unisons going up the. Normally you play unison fourth finger A string, open E string, but I stretched that and played them all the way up the neck. And I started the Blue Night solo at a unison G, first finger on the E string, fourth finger on the A string. That had never been done before, uh, to my knowledge, ever. I don't even, maybe a little bit of Paganini, but I can't remember ever seeing that. I sort of invented that in my mind. And that he liked that a lot. He would
Yeah.
mention it on shows.
So you were consciously trying to expand the bluegrass fiddle, whatever you want to call it,
Change it,
world. Change it. Yeah.
change it completely.
Yeah. Yeah. And you
Uh,
succeeded.
thank
You
you.
did
I
succeed.
have to agree. And
Um,
let me mention the recording sessions. We recorded an album called Bluegrass Time, which has pretty much the bulk of my work with Monroe on there. And we we never heard any of the songs before we walked in that studio. So the producer, I wish I could remember his name, would play these songs for Bill to do, and Bill would say, okay. Oh, he played among them some Bob Dylan songs, and we as a band said we're not going to do that. We refused to play Bob Dylan, which was a huge mistake that would have put Bill over the top. But we were such
yeah.
snobs, so we
Yeah.
did these other songs, which were great songs, old time songs, and learned them on the spot. So every solo I played, I had just made up at that moment. And it turns out that that year of my violin progression, my artistic progression, that was my peak, 1966. Not that I went down from there, but I was never higher than that. It was an absolute peak of technique, youth, brain power. Young brain power could remember anything on the spot. All these combinations of physical and mental capacities blended at that moment in that recording session. Now, of course, that changed over time. Some went better, some went worse, but they were never altogether that well at that moment.
Yeah. Did you bring a fiddle with you to Bill Monroe's band and use it the entire time? Like you had your
Yeah,
fiddle
yeah.
yeah.
It was some crappy old fiddle. I loaned it to Pete Rowan, never got it back. I lost. I'd love to have it now because I did all that recording. But
Yeah.
back to Scotty Stoneman. His fiddle, between the top and one of the arches, there was a gap about that big. You could put a folded up magazine through it. It was a broken piece of crap. And he made the most gorgeous sound ever. So it's not the sound is not in the violin. It's
No.
in the brain and the hands.
No.
So my crappy fiddle didn't matter either back then. And that's where I first noticed that with his really broken down fiddle. He was useless for
Yeah.
anyone else to play.
It's funny. I grew up listening to jazz. My mom was a stride, a classical pianist, but also played a lot of stride piano.
Oh, yeah,
And
I love that.
she grew up on Benny Goodman, and Teddy Wilson was her hero. So we went to see
Yeah,
Teddy Wilson at a little dive bar in Connecticut when I was about 18, playing this beat up old upright. But as soon as he played it, it was Teddy Wilson. It didn't matter what it was, a shitty old piano. It just,
yeah,
he had the touch and he brought it out. It was like, oh my God.
like that. It's kind of a miracle. It's kind of defies physics in a way, but that's absolutely a true observation. Absolutely.
Do you have any favorite fiddle players among the people playing today? I was thinking when you're talking about your chop, I one of my favorite fiddle players is Michael Cleveland. Now he plays the chop. He just about seems like he's going to break the fiddle in half with each, because he brings his hand way over his head and slams it down like this big circular slamming chop that he does on the strings, which is the opposite of what you were talking about. No subtlety, but maybe because he can't hear, I don't know, but it's crazy to watch him play it.
Yeah, no, I've watched him
Yeah,
endlessly. He's
yeah.
technically the most proficient fiddle player who ever lived. There's no comparison.
Mm.
And he was actually he's deaf in one ear,
Yeah.
and of course he's blind. So his entire existence is that fiddle. He has a focus on it that none of us could ever achieve.
Hmm.
Not that I'd be jealous of that. I wouldn't want to pay that price for that focus. Incredible. He he doesn't understand the chop at all. He just smashes down on
Yeah.
backbeats.
Right.
Um, I was on a podcast with him one time. We two of us had a moment to talk together. Um, I have to. This is a minor criticism of him. Of I guess you would say poetry. Every time he plays everything he knows. He doesn't condense at all. Which, if he did, it would be even more amazing. I mean, it can't be. I mean, he's already the most amazing there is, but he can
Yeah.
increase on that a little bit in my mind. Uh, if he picked and chose a little bit, but he doesn't. What's the difference? He doesn't. Why should he even care? You know,
Yeah.
that's just a
Yeah.
little aesthetic premise of mine.
That's interesting. I often ask people on this podcast, as you've gotten older, have you have you changed your style of playing, your approach to playing? And I got a nice answer from Todd Phillips, the bassist,
Oh,
on this.
yeah,
He said, when I listen to my old records, I play so many fewer notes now, and I always try to play the right ones. He said.
yeah.
He said, when I listen to that old stuff, I can't believe how many notes I played.
Well, I like his old stuff. I don't know about that. Um,
I think he was
but
being a little sarcastic, but I mean, it was a
yeah,
nice answer I thought from it.
yeah. No, he's a wonderful guy, good friend, great bass player. No criticism of him at all.
Yeah.
I disagree with his own self criticism. I think he was great back then, as well
Well,
as
yeah, maybe. Yeah. He might have just been making a point.
yeah,
Um, we
yeah,
we just had a concert here this past weekend with Bruce Molsky and Tony Trischka as a duo. Now I know you have a long history with Tony Trischka, right? You've
absolutely very long. He
yeah.
is my favorite banjo player.
Hmm.
Well, let me back up a minute. There are two geniuses, innovators of the banjo, Earl Scruggs and Tony Trischka. Now I'm leaving out Bill Keith. He was an innovator, but it was kind of mild mannered. Tony Trischka is an innovator and wild haired. So I put him, and Earl Scruggs obviously invented the whole damn thing and was an absolute genius. I transcribed every note Earl Scruggs ever recorded into notation, and played some of the violin, played it on the banjo, of course, and um, absolutely incredible. I don't know where it came from. It came from nowhere. And then Tony took that and just went nuts. And Tony is the most amazing ability. He never plans anything, never plays the same thing twice. He just starts playing, and every time it's different, and it's also perfect every time.
Yeah.
He's astounding.
Yeah. Yeah, that was listening to him with Bruce because they were doing a lot of old-timey stuff.
Yeah,
Um, and there was there was so much rhythmic subtlety and syncopation going on between those two guys. I don't even know if the audience caught half of it, but it was just like it was remarkable. I mean, because you think of old time music just kind of goes along over and over and over, but there was so much going on, and they were looking at each other and smiling and like trying. I don't know. It was just it was a very nice atmosphere to be with those two, listening to those two together.
yeah. Bruce Molsky is absolutely brilliant. He might be. I hate to say favorite because I always forget name other people, but he's up there. Phenomenal fiddle player, tone, touch, everything. I have a recording live on YouTube of myself playing Little Rabbit with Tony Trischka, which is also in the Bruce Molsky genre of tunes, and you can
Sure.
see that same craziness going on.
Yeah, yeah. So thinking about your musical career, you know, you went from an unhappy classical violin player to discovering Scotty Stoneman and played with Bill Monroe, bluegrass. Then I guess you went to jug band music. Then you joined the Seatrain band, and then kind of went back to bluegrass with the Muleskinner band. So what what I don't know how to ask the question. What was that journey like for you? Like going from all these different genres, one to the other, and then kind of back to bluegrass. Was bluegrass always like your true uh, kind of soul music, or because you never seemed like you ever really lost your bluegrass touch or feeling,
I,
even in progressive
thank you,
rock?
thank you very much. I appreciate that. Uh, no, back around the Bill Monroe days for me, I had bluegrass was my favorite kind of music I'd ever heard, and I would espouse that to everyone I met. But let's not forget that poster behind you, Tony Rice.
Yeah.
There was a big part of my journey. What an amazing. Well, we'll talk about it later, I guess, as a separate issue, because if you have him on the wall,
Well, I do only because he was my musical hero, really. Tony and Oscar Peterson, my two musical heroes.
oh my God, me too. Well, Oscar, that's amazing. Oscar
Yeah,
Peterson. See, I shouldn't mention favorites because other names come up, but
yep,
he's amazing. He's like the Tony Trischka on the piano in a way. He just
yeah,
plays and plays and plays, and it's
yeah.
just uh, comes out of him. He's amazing. Good call. Good call. I got to get.
And then when I started doing presenting musical bluegrass concerts in 2008, of course, the first one I tried to get and got was Tony Rice Unit, and he played four times here. And
Oh,
the first show, it was just all instrumental. There was no singing in the band, and you know, it was Tony and Wyatt and Bryn Davies on bass and Ricky Simpkins on mandolin. It was just a quartet
right,
at
right.
that point. Then
Familiar.
Josh Williams joined up and was singing all Tony's songs for the last few shows he played here. But yeah, I just everything about him I just loved and still do. Yeah,
Oh, he was a great singer. I think Tony was. It's
yeah,
a horrible thing with his voice happening, but he had this the touch and the phrasing. He was a wonderful singer in my mind. You
yes,
know.
yeah. Well, this brings me to the band Muleskinner, which included, of course, Clarence White, who was Tony's hero, and then Tony kind of took up his guitar and his mantle and took it to
Yeah.
different places. But what
Yeah.
do you have a few memories of the band? I've only seen one or two videos of that band on YouTube, a famous show with um, you know, you and Bill, Keith and Peter Rowan and Dave Grisman. I think maybe Stuart Schulman on bass. I'm not sure.
Yes, that's right.
Yeah.
Uh,
There's
well,
not
that
much
was
available to see, but what are your memories of that whole
well. We
experience
didn't
with
do
that band?
much. We did
Yeah.
the video. What happened was that uh, I can't remember his name. I was called by the producer of the PBS or some station to put a band together for Bill Monroe to back up Bill Monroe, who was coming down to do a show. And halfway down, we're on stage, sort of getting ready, and we get a phone call. The bus broke down. No Bill Monroe. So we went on and did the show. We did that show, uh, threw out those song titles to each other, and that was it. That was that band. Um, we'd all known that material, of course. Um, Clarence was absolutely amazing uh, at that time with us. I had known him from the Kentucky Colonels and Scotty Stoneman, around that time at the Ashrow as well. But there we go again, mentioning favorites and finding someone else to mention. Clarence White, of course.
Yeah,
Clarence.
right. Yeah. Yeah, I never heard him live, and um, some of his rhythmics. I mean, Tony Rice to me plays the most, um, what's the word? Intelligent and complicated and simple at the same time. Rhythm guitar of anybody. It's almost hard to figure out. It's just so subtle. But Clarence White's rhythm playing was equally subtle and driving I think in a quieter way. I don't know. I'm just basing it on what I've heard and seen, which is not too much. But I found his rhythm playing uh, different from Tony Rice's, but just I don't know, all these little runs of things, offbeat syncopations and stuff that you go, oh my God, what did he just do?
That's absolutely correct. I think we should go back to Todd Phillips for a minute on this,
Okay.
because I think he produced or was involved a lot on the Tony Rice projects. Who was the no? Forget the producer's name.
I know.
Engineer.
Bill
Billy
Wolf.
Wolf.
Bill
Billy
Wolf.
Wolf.
Yeah, he was
So what they
involved.
would do on those sessions after they were done, more or less recording, they would gather around the recording booth and turn on Tony's track alone just to listen to the rhythm, because it was otherworldly. You didn't quite know what was going on with the band playing, but if you pulled that out, they would over and over again just listen to that and try to figure it out. It was entirely different than Clarence's rhythm.
Yeah.
The approach, I think, was more chordal, and Clarence would put in maybe more runs. I'm not sure about that, but they were very much different, as you pointed out. But and equally miraculous.
Yeah. So that band really wasn't together for that long.
No,
No.
I think we did one gig somewhere. It was called the something Bluegrass Rebels or Bluegrass Dropouts, I think it was called. And when somewhere East played one gig, and no, we didn't do anything. Well, we couldn't because there was no Clarence. Right after the recording, he was gone. I think we had, and I think the gig we did was without him. My memory is not that great.
Yeah.
Long ago.
It seems pretty good to me.
Oh,
that's a long time ago. It's amazing.
Sure is.
To remember.
It is.
So I guess when Clarence was killed in that accident, it must have been, for a lot of people, a really tragic and sad thing. I mean, I don't know what his. I mean, he's become kind of this legend, kind of like the band Muleskinner. Short-lived bluegrass life and legendary name. But were people? Was he that well known that people were all very upset, aside from his close friends? Or was he not even that known at that point in his career?
I think he was very well known from the Kentucky Colonels
Yeah.
episodes and gigs. They played a lot around L.A. No, he was very worshipped back then.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, I would say he was well known back then.
Yeah. I've always thought too that he had a very good singing voice. The few times I've heard him sing, probably mostly from that video, I very much enjoyed his singing. I don't think he was known as a singer, but I mean, I thought he was a very good singer with a very unique, good voice.
Yeah, he sang mostly harmonies, but the duet with him and Peter Rowan was stunning on the Muleskinner album. They really hit. They just locked in, and made both of their voices sound better.
Mm-hmm.
Uh, so yeah, he very knowledgeable singer, Clarence.
Yeah, yeah. Can you talk a little bit about your, I know your friendship with Peter Rowan goes way back and probably still continues to this day, because I think we did mention you in our conversation, but how did you, he's a Massachusetts guy, you're a California guy. Where did you meet?
Oh, we met at that backstage for the Bill Monroe concert in Canada.
Okay.
When I walked up to him and said, well, "Who's Bill Monroe?"
So that was the
That's when
first
we
time you
first
met.
met. Yeah.
Yeah.
Then I think when I moved to Nashville to do the job, I think Pete and I were roommates at that time in different places. One of the places we roomed in was out on a farm because we couldn't afford anything, so we had to drive out of the place. And we would take the fiddle and the guitar, go out and play right in the face of cows. We couldn't believe that the cow has no consciousness whatsoever. We tried to break through, but we never did. But we did a lot of that.
It's funny
Crazy.
because my daughter, who's younger, she's 17 and she's vegan and very much into yoga and holistic stuff, firmly believes that cows do have a consciousness and emotions, and you can actually connect with them on an emotional level if you can figure out how. I don't know if that's true, but I kind of believe that animals do have a consciousness that can be approached, maybe with music. I don't know.
Well,
Maybe not bluegrass, but I don't know.
I think it's been shown that plant life is actually more responsive to music than
Hmm.
cows. That's been I think that's been shown. I don't know which plant where, uh, but your daughter has an interesting point on that. The horses, on the other hand, are absolutely aware of what's going on.
Yes.
They're one of the most amazing animals ever to come on the earth.
Yeah.
Just the word horsepower
Horsepower.
shows
Yeah.
a lot right there. Um,
They can definitely tell if the rider is nervous or inexperienced. I can attest to that because I've been thrown off a couple of horses that knew right away that I had no business being on their backs.
they can see in back. They can see a 280 degrees. Did you know that? They can see in back of them.
Yeah.
They're
Well,
amazing. Yeah,
I guess it saw me.
yeah. It's so coming. That's right.
Remember you were in a band called Seatrain, which at the time when I was listening and I was into, I guess that was what, mid 70s
Yeah,
Seatrain. Yeah.
yeah.
So I was, getting out of high school and stuff. And it was especially that song, 13 Questions, was a very, very big, popular song in Connecticut. I'm sure it was worldwide, but I mean, that was a song I listened to again recently for the first time in many years. And I was struck by how powerful. I mean, I said, "Oh my God!" It was like I don't know what it reminded me of. A little bit of Chicago, very progressive, just driving kind of cool music. Especially that song. I always have loved that song. I don't know where that song came from, who wrote that, or how that came about, but maybe it
Well,
was a
yeah.
drug-filled haze. I don't know.
No. Jim Roberts was our lyricist. Andy Kulberg wrote the music, our
Oh,
bass
Jim.
player,
Hmm.
and it starts out with a chop.
Right.
Heavy chop. And when we were recording it with George Martin was our producer. We were the first band he produced after leaving the Beatles. He then took us
Hmm.
on, which was quite an honor for us. And when it came to recording that song, he did not like the chop. It was not British for very anti British rowdy, and he said if you're doing it, take out those middle notes, the
Uh,
upstroke, take those out. And he tried to take them out, on the board with an automated board. And we argued about that, and we finally got left him in. But he didn't like that at all. Uh,
Interesting. Yeah. I know back in the 60s and 70s, music was kind of a soundtrack to politics for a lot of people. It
hmm.
was very much a part of life. I wonder if music is kind of lost that crucial role in modern political life that I don't know. I feel like music has gotten a lot less political over time compared to
Well,
what it
pop
was at one point. Pop
Pop
music.
music
Yeah.
is emptied out and has nothing
Right.
political or anything. It's just it's empty, vapid,
Yeah.
auto tunes, machine created. It shouldn't be called music, but
Yeah.
the other end, the acoustic end of music is still going on, and I'm sure there's some very powerful voices in that area of music, but not pop music is
Yeah.
well, you can tell how much I despise it. It's useless. I can't listen to it.
I hear you. I know it doesn't mean anything to me. I was just wondering because I mean, I feel like music is important in culture, not just for entertainment purposes, but also it expresses people's anger and angst and willingness to change and so forth. And I don't know if that's still, I guess it still happens in certain kinds of folk music, but I feel like back in the day, music was like the soundtrack to all the stuff that was going on, and now it's not. I don't know if that's true or not.
Very good point. Absolutely, very good point. Uh, Everybody was living the music, singing it, talking about it. Did you hear the new Beatles release? Did you hear Jefferson Airplane? It was all involved in social life, political life. You're right. It was imbued in the culture in a way that is absolutely not right now. Uh, I think the machines and the computer technology sort of took over, unfortunately, and it threw all that stuff out. But no, your point is absolutely well taken. I fully agree.
You've lived through many eras and styles of music. Do you write down your musical memories, or are you going to write a book, for example, or a movie or something about your musical life? Because you have a very unique, have had a very unique musical life. Let's face it. I mean, very influential in lots of kinds of music, and um, I don't know. Do you keep track of all that stuff? Do you have a library of all your things that you've done, or?
Oh, yeah, I have a huge archive of recorded music. Um, my own, yes, I don't write anything down. I'm not, except, album notes here and there. Um, I don't write books or anything, but my archive is insurmountably large. I don't even know how to deal with it. It's too much because it includes all my sideman stuff. I'm 100 or 200 hundreds of albums, LPs that I would be called to play on a song here and there, and all my live recordings. It's too much. I hope somebody cares enough to go through it at some point because I can't. It's too big.
Yeah.
I don't know
I'm
what to
sure
do with it.
somebody would. I don't know. I mean, I always think it's important to like keep this stuff,
It's,
for,
it's, it's here in the room that I'm sitting in now, along with
yeah,
my, uh, it's a different subject, but my photography art archive is also very huge. I
yeah,
print everything very large format. Everything on the website is a large format print. So there's hundreds of those sitting next to the music files. There's a
right.
lot here. I'm running out of room, but I'm not gonna throw it away.
No,
It's
I hope not.
yeah, no. Why don't you, if I'm gone and you're around, why don't you find somebody to look through it?
Okay.
Yeah.
I know your friend David Grisman, I think, just celebrated a birthday, had a big concert for him in Nashville, I believe. Do you still stay in touch with him? I mean, he lives out there too in California, right? Not near you, I guess, but
He lives in
yeah.
Port Townsend, Washington. Oh
Oh,
yeah,
he
no, we're in
does.
touch. We're very much in touch.
Yeah.
We did a Zoom thing very recently
Hmm.
with I think it was Peter Rowan, David, and I, which was a lot of fun. Had a lot of good memories. Yeah, we're in
Yeah.
touch.
So at some point in your life, you decided to stop playing the fiddle and to go into photography. Was it like a
No, and I
decision you
didn't
made,
decide
or
to. No, no,
no?
no. I had a physical. My hand fell apart. Well, a
Hmm.
couple of things fell apart at once. I did a tour of Japan in 2013 with the jug band, and came back with the heart disease of all things from eating bad sushi. I had something called endocarditis, and it was a inflammation of the heart muscle. So I lost all my strength. I couldn't even pick up a violin. But also around that time, I had a double jeopardy. I had a finger problem in my left hand. This finger started to become useless. I couldn't use it on the violin. So those two things together forced me out of the violin. I couldn't play it, couldn't hold it, couldn't finger it, couldn't do anything with it. Now I gained my strength back after the heart. I mean, I got cured from that, but the finger thing never went away, and I literally can't play the violin physically. I think the last time I played might have been. I was able to get it back together if I had like 2 months' notice. I could start practicing slow, build it back up, and I think the last time I did that was in 2018, and I did a workshop for Julie Lauren Lieberman called Strings Without Boundaries. I ordered the favor to do that, so I prepared for it, and that was in the same town where Grisman lived, or near it. It was in Seattle. So then I went over to his house and we jammed, and that's literally the last time I ever played. And there's no recording of that, unfortunately. But that was it. So 2013, quit, and 18 went back for one thing, and then that was it. And did photography, doing all that, which I completely love.
Mm-hmm. Did you ever take up the mandolin in any way, or a lot of fiddle players play mandolin? Or
oh yeah, in Seatrain I played electric mandolin.
You did, yeah.
With single strings, with all the effects, what fuzz tone, what, all that stuff. Mm-hmm. It was quite wild.
Yeah.
But I don't, and I, for a long time, had a mandolin around. I don't remember when or where, but I was able to play it pretty well sometimes.
Yeah, yeah. So at this point in your life, you just have you can't play the fiddle. You just don't want to. You're just not going to even go.
Well,
or are you?
Want to? I don't know. I couldn't. It wasn't a matter of choice.
Yeah, yeah.
But I do dream a lot of playing amazing solos. I do have those dreams frequently.
Yeah.
And they're very real. And I still imagine solos in my mind when I see some video on the internet or something. You know, it's in there. It's in my brain, never to go away. But physically, it's out of the question.
Is it just that finger still that's keeping you from doing it, or is it?
Yeah, that finger. I actually could do the chop. Oh, pretty well, but there's no reason to just do that without the left hand. You know, nobody. Yeah. The finger is shot.
There's no hope for the finger.
No, I had surgery on it.
Oh, you did.
And to remove what there was a growth at the tip called lipoma, which is a fat deposit, and I had it was like literally. Can you see my hand? That high off my hand, a little cone, and I was still playing, but I played on the flat, and then I couldn't do that anymore. So I had it surgically removed, and the scar tissue from that increased the sensitivity to pain before than it was before. So I'm really ruined. It's really ruined.
Yeah. Do you have a personal philosophy or belief system that kind of keeps you motivated and going forward? A religion, or just a zest for life? Or how do you explain that you're still actively doing all this stuff at whatever age you are, 80, 82 or something?
82, yeah. Well,
yeah.
There's no religion. I'm a full-on atheist.
Oh, good for you.
I love it when people call that a belief system. They call atheism a belief system. I love that. Anyway, zest for life. It's a cliche. I was born with that. I was born with a driving force to do stuff, and it just never went away. And I can't say I nurture it because I don't know how to nurture it I don't know how to isolate it in order to work on it, but I certainly don't let it go at all. And it's very easy to maintain. It's not a philosophy. It's more like a built-in wiring system.
Mm.
As far as I can,
Yeah.
is that an answer? I don't know.
No, that's a good answer. Yeah, and I just was wondering, I mean, I think I'm 72, so I'm always thinking of
Yeah,
what keeps me going, and um, just wondering what keeps you going, keeps you active. I guess you're busy taking photographs and
yeah,
putting
Photoshop.
up photos. Yeah, yeah.
I mean, it was Pro Tools, then Photoshop, right into one to the into the other. They're very analogous, extremely analogous
Hmm.
software.
Yeah.
Um,
No,
uh,
if you were teaching a beginner or intermediate bluegrass fiddle player today, what advice would you give? Would you have a specific tip or advice you would give them just to help them along the way? I mean, obviously there's techniques and yada yada, but what would you say in general? I don't know if you've probably done a lot of teaching in your career, I would think, over time.
uh, Immense amount of teaching, private
Yeah.
here in my studio, daily, many students for years, workshops, fiddle things, gatherings, immense amount of teaching. Um, well, let's see. Fiddle players come from two places, either from the classical violin or from nowhere. So there's a different set of things to start with. If they come from nowhere, I got to teach them the classical technique. I have to teach them how to hold it, thumbs, fingers. I teach that, not playing simple scales, simple uh, exercises that I developed that are related to bluegrass, little 5-note things and
Yeah.
string crossing things, as a way of gaining that the proper. You have to have the proper, unless you're Scott Stoneman or Michael Cleveland, you have to have proper technique. Well, Michael Cleveland's left hand technique, his right hand technique doesn't exist. I don't think he does much with the right hand. His left hand is quite amazing, um, as well as Stuart Duncan and a few other the greats. Stuart Duncan has it all, both right hand, left hand, but he can't chop it all. Um, so if they come from nowhere, I have to teach them the basic technique because they can't play without that. If they come from the technique side of learning, I have to undo a lot of things. The first thing I undo is can you see me like this? Lower that right arm, take it all the way down because they play like this, like
Yeah.
Heifetz. He could do it, but they can't. Take that down. Then take the left elbow and bring it in. So when you take the right elbow down, the wrist comes up. You're ready to chop. You're ready to do anything. Are you ready to do spiccato? All kinds of stuff. You take the left elbow in, and the left hand comes like that. Look what it's ready to play the violin. But like this, it's not. But like this, it is. So that's the first thing I undo with the classical players, and most of them never get it. They're too far gone in the constant vibrato. And I mean,
Yeah.
the constant vibrato is a great thing if you know what you're doing. Perlman or Heifetz or any of those guys. Uh, but if you don't, it's just awful. So now back to the guys who have come from nothing. They do a horrible, slow, obnoxious vibrato. Stop that entirely. Don't do any of vibrato at all. Don't worry about it. You don't need it. So that's what I tell them. There's nothing more sickening than a fast vibrato or a slow vibrato. They both make me nauseous.
Yeah.
I think that answers that question.
Yeah, well, it's funny because up here in Connecticut, most of the bluegrass fiddlers that I've met or run into are classical players who are, you know, trying to play bluegrass. And as you say, they 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 just have to unlearn everything they've learned, and they can't do it. They can't do these sliding double stops and the chop and all this. It's just so foreign to what they've been taught since they were four in Suzuki classes that they just I mean, they struggle. Some of them get okay, but like you said, I think it's very hard to get that kind of loose, kind of bluesy feel. I don't know how you teach that, but
Yeah, that's what I did.
that's what you did.
Yeah,
So
I
you
did
don't
that.
you don't you can't teach without playing, right? You don't still teach. You can't teach
No, no,
somebody.
no,
You
no. You
can't.
can't teach without playing. And oh, by the way, um, I went back to classical violin seriously in the 70s. It took like 10 years, hard on classical, practicing 4 or 5 hours a day. I wanted to get that back. I wanted to not get it back. I wanted to get it
Right.
because there was a lot in there that I could apply to fiddle playing in general. So I did a lot of that. I learned tons of concertos, etudes, the whole thing. So I was able to be a decent teacher on both genres, which I did
Uh,
back then.
yeah. Do you miss? I guess you do. If you're dreaming about it, you do miss the fiddle. You
Uh,
somewhere in your consciousness that you miss it.
well, yeah, the physicality of producing that music. Sure, I don't go around missing it. I'm not sitting here. I don't miss it now. I don't consciously ever miss it
Right.
because that would mean I want to do it again or want it back, which I don't. Let me put it another way. My entire career as a musician had been climbing up the mountain. At, Go up and ask somebody to like what you're doing. Go up again, ask for somebody to hire you, and up, always asking for things up and up the mountain. So when I quit, that was the top of that mountain, and I went back down, which was a huge relief and pleasure to not
Mm.
do that anymore. It's horrible. It was terrible. I mean, it was draining emotionally and psychologically. Just begging, begging, begging. That's a musician's life. You beg, and then you get disappointed. Beg. I
Yeah.
mean, musicians have it tough, no matter how good you are. You
Right.
don't. Well, so there's a echelon where you get the calls. You don't have to make any calls, but very few are up there, and they have to make the calls, or nothing will happen.
Yes.
So that I was in the lower bulk of making calls. Nothing ever came hardly without my making a call to ask for it. So
Yeah.
what a relief. So I don't miss that. And that's a big part of being a musician. So of course I don't miss it.
Yeah.
I love it. I love it not doing that.
Did you
However,
feel it?
wait,
Go ahead.
I'm back on the mountain again with photography, however. I'm back
Yeah.
up begging and
Yep.
asking and showing and but fuck it. What else are you gonna
Yeah.
do?
Did you ever feel when you were playing that you had to live up to a certain standard of whatever you set for yourself and soloing or playing, like pressuring yourself to always be innovative and good in your own mind? Or was that a conscious thing with you in your career, or is that a hard one to answer?
No, no. It's very easy to answer and very conscious. I had a flaw as a performer that a lot of other musicians in my genre did not have. I always made mistakes. I could never just play a whole thing without falling apart somewhere in it. And I was always, very, very few live performances live up to that hope of playing a full solo. Okay. So uh, just a lot of disappointment in that. Other musicians along with me, even in my band, didn't have that problem. They could easily just every solo, fine. No, it was just fine. I would always fall apart somewhere, and sometimes not even be able to start very good. So it was I don't know what it was, a consistency issue with me that was always disappointing. Uh, so I think that's what you're asking about.
Yeah, that's it. That's it. I didn't know that. I would never have known that about your playing, but
Well, I try not to let the others. I try to let out only what's good. It's
yeah,
hard to find though.
yeah. Were you ever in your musical life discouraged enough to think about quitting? I mean, not because of the physical stuff, but just in your performing career, you just said, I've done enough. I don't want to do this anymore for a while or something. Did you ever?
Absolutely,
Yeah,
absolutely. Going up that mountain,
yeah,
I would get refused or said no to so many times in a row. I said, God damn it, I'm going to do what I call, and I wrote it down, I wrote a whole list. It's called the full quit, FULLQUIT, with a list. I still have that somewhere. And I would go there many times,
yeah,
climbing up that mountain. It was very discouraging.
yeah,
Um, but I kept going until the hand told me I couldn't do it.
yeah. Do you still have your fiddle, the one that or do you have a
Oh
lot of
yeah,
fiddles?
no.
You have,
Well, that's interesting. My wife is a violinist, so we have a house full of too many violins. I have all of mine, which I don't know what to do with, and then she has violin players amass violins. We trade
yes,
them, buy them, sell them, keep them. So there's way too many violins in this house. All of mine are still here. I have violas, and I even have a cello somewhere, but I never touch them. And my wife doesn't like my instruments. She's from the classical, more a little stiffer
yes,
genre, and she likes her violins, which I don't like because they're too hard to play. They're stiff.
yeah,
My violins are loose, low action. A whole different schools, and
yeah,
she's fully active right now in the LA Opera and the LA Philharmonic, Master Chorale, everything in LA. She's very much in demand and very good at it.
yeah.
Great orchestral player. And she was in my string quartet for 10 years.
Nice, nice.
So a lot of violins around here.
So none of the young fiddle players in bluegrass ever call you up and say, "Hey, Richard, could I try your fiddle out?" Or like someone like Bronwyn Keith Hines or some of these young great players. They don't call you up and want to, I don't know, chat or borrow, or never happens.
It never happened. What a great idea. I'd love for a fiddle player who I respect to come over here so I can explain my setup. My setup is very, very involved. A lot of technology in it. But once you see it and try it, it's amazing. I would love to hand it off to someone. Maybe someone you can start put the call out, but they have to be really good. You mentioned a good player just then. Uh,
Yeah, Bronwyn Keith Hines. Well, she was my first interview on the podcast when I first started out. I interviewed her. I interviewed Jason Carter as well. Then they got
yeah.
married, and I
Oh,
find her a
wait a minute, wait.
fabulous.
They're married?
They're married.
When was that?
Oh, I think in the fall maybe they got married in
Oh my
Nashville.
God. He's a good friend of mine. I didn't know
Yeah,
that.
yeah. I don't know. I don't think they made a huge deal about it, but it was public knowledge, and they had a musical wedding at the Grand Ole Opry, and a bunch of people played with them, and they sang and played together, and got married. But I'm
They
thinking
got to
of her
come
only
over.
because
They
I
have to
just
come over.
love
And
her.
They have to come
So
over and look at my fiddle. One of them is going to want it.
I'm gonna if that's an open offer, I will text Bronwyn and suggest you get in touch with you and come over and check it out. I think she would be thrilled to. Have you ever met her?
No.
I think she would be thrilled to meet you. I don't know her all that well, but she played up here with her band Mile 12 a few times, and I've kept in touch with her. I'm just thinking, I mean, it seems a shame to have such an amazing instrument or instruments not being used, not being played. To me,
But yeah, the,
that's
the
like
one I
having.
have is amazing. I've done blindfold sound tests with it,
Hmm.
and it's a copy of a Stradivarius made by James Wimmer, Santa Barbara.
Hmm.
And
Hmm.
blindfolded, it sounds as good or better than the real Strads.
Yeah.
And the Strad that it was copied from, in fact, I had that ability, a chance to compare those. It's an amazing sound and amazingly easy to play instrument. I'd love to hand it off to someone. I'd love that.
Well, if you don't mind, I'll just mention it. I'm going to text her and just mention the fact that you expressed interest, and who knows what would happen. She's the one I think of, and there's so many great young fiddlers, but personally, I just like her as a fiddle player, a person, singer. She has a great album out. She plays with Molly Tuttle. She's just doing really great. And I think she would, okay, it's a deal. I'll see what
Wonderful.
I can do.
Wonderful. Wonderful.
Are there any questions that I didn't ask you that I should have? Are there questions that I did ask you that I shouldn't have? Or how should we end this up here? It's been a good
Well,
hour and 10 minutes, and I feel like it's, a good place to stop. But is there anything I should have asked you that you'd like to espouse on a little bit?
Well, first of all, everything you did ask me was right on. No problems with any of the questions so far at all. All great
Good.
questions. As far as what else is there to ask, I have no idea.
Maybe next time we'll do a thing about your photography and talk about that. You can show
Well,
stuff.
that would be good. Or if you want to do a thing about music, we could talk about my later self-released projects, musical projects,
Okay.
which are wonderful and it's never saw the light of day anywhere.
Yeah.
Hands Across the Pond, which is a Celtic project, and Richard Greene and the Brothers Barton, which is a bluegrass project. I'd love to play samples of that and talk about it because no one's ever heard it. And I have manufactured them. They're sitting in the garage. Self-produced, self-made music projects, which I never get a chance to talk about. I'd love to do that.
Yeah.
And play samples.
We'll talk again sometime. I've been fascinated by this conversation. I know you asked me for a set of questions, and I said, well, it'll just be, memories, and I didn't think it would be that hard to talk with you, and it hasn't been. You've remembered everything and been very forthcoming, and I've really enjoyed this.
Good. We'll talk more about Tony Rice too when we get a chance.
Okay.
That'd be great. All right.
Okay. So, we'll leave it at that. I'll send you this interview when I get it, maybe later tonight or tomorrow, and you can listen to it, and then we'll stay in touch. I really enjoyed this.
All right. Is it going to be on the internet? Where on the internet will it be?
It's on a lot of these podcasting sites like Spotify and Apple Podcast, YouTube Podcast, so people can find it. And I put it on my website, and I email all my people, so people will find out about it.
Great. Thank you very much.
All right. Thank you very much. Very nice talking to you. I'll be in touch.
Thank you. Bye-bye.
Okay. Bye. I hope you enjoyed our podcast, and thanks for listening. Visit our website, guitartownct.com, for concert and podcast schedules, or just to send us a message. We'd love to hear from you.